All right, in this video, I want to talk a little bit about surveys. So right now I'm in the middle of a transaction. I'm trying to purchase a property that I am potentially going to either flip or keep as a rental. I'm not really sure yet, but within that transaction or within the transaction, I have to order a survey. Now, for those of you who don't know, a survey is basically when a company comes out and gets a survey of the land. So you know exactly where your property boundaries are, you know how much of the land you owned, where you own it. It also gives you an accurate legal description of the property and the property ID or folio number. It's a pretty important uh, thing to do, to order a survey on a property before you buy it. And you always want to do this. I have to do this because I am getting a hard money loan on this property. So the lender requires a survey, and that makes sense. If someone's lending you money, or especially a company is lending you money to purchase a piece of property, they want to make sure they get as much information on that property as possible. Surveys are an option if you're paying cash. If you're paying cash, if you're not getting a loan, then you don't have to get a survey. But if you are getting a loan, whether it be a FHA, VA, conventional hard money, if there's some type of lender involved, 10 times out of 10, they are going to require a survey. Now, the reason why I bring up a survey in this video is because me ordering a survey on this property actually brought up a small issue. I call it a small issue because that's what it is. It could be a bigger issue, but the results of the survey showed that the property that I'm buying crosses over into a public utility easement. So the property, and I believe it's like, if I remember correctly, it's the back portion of the property. So the backyard, a piece of the fence goes over a public utility easement. And what that is, if the county or city needed to come out and do something to the power lines, or the sewage pipe or something, my fence is in the way of that. The property's fence is in the way of that. Now that's like a small one, that's not really a big deal. I'm still willing to buy the property with that issue or defect because it's not a big deal. I mean, I can either take down the fence or apply for an abandonment of easement, to make everything go away. However, it could have been a lot worse if you order a survey and it comes back and it shows the property you're purchasing or your neighbor's property encroaching. For those of you who don't know, an encroachment is basically when a portion of the neighbor's property or your property is like trespassing or crossing over into a property that's not yours. So if the neighbor is encroaching on my property, their fence, a portion of their house, their tree branches, bushes, or whatever is encroaching on my property, is crossing over into my property, and vice versa. Now, this can be a serious issue because it really depends on what exactly is encroaching. So, for example, if the neighbor's property is encroaching on my property, well, then what exactly is encroaching on my property from my neighbor's property? Well, if it's like an addition or an actual portion of the house, then we have a huge problem, because then that neighbor is going to have to either knock the property or a portion of that property that's encroaching on my property down. And in most cases, they're not willing to do that. And if they're not willing to do that, if they're not really willing to, come to a conclusion to resolve it that way, then an attorney has to get involved, and you have to go through possible litigation, adverse possession claims, quiet title. It's just a real big mess. It costs a lot of money in legal fees. And it's just not fun. And it takes a lot of time. And, It's not much you can do. Whereas if it's something like, like I mentioned before, the tree branches crossing over into my property, well then, that can be resolved easily. You can walk over to the neighbor's property and just, politely ask if they can cut back their tree branches or their bushes, and everything goes away. But sometimes that's not the case. And what will point this out will be the survey that you order before you purchase the property. So this is why it's extremely important to order a survey. If you're paying cash, okay, it's optional. You don't have to get a survey, but I highly recommend you get a survey so you exactly know if there are any issues, if there are any encroachment issues or easement issues on that property before you buy it. Because there's nothing worse than buying a property, especially a property that you're looking to flip. If you're looking to stay in the property, live in it long term or keep it as a rental, then it's not really that big of an issue. It's still an issue, but it's not that big of an issue. And the reason why it's still an issue is because you're looking to flip the property, sell it to a buyer, you have to get in and out of the property, then that's where it becomes a huge issue. Then that next buyer isn't going to want to take on that issue. So you have to think of it that way. It may not be a big deal to you, but ultimately, if your goal is to sell this property fairly quickly, you have to think that, okay, is a buyer going to be willing to take over this encroachment issue? All right. That's why it's important to get a survey. If you are a realtor, make sure you encourage your clients to order a survey. You need to know as much about the property as possible before you buy it, so you know what you're buying. And then when you order the survey and the results come back and it doesn't come back normal or it doesn't come back good, now you could take what's wrong with that survey and present it before the seller. And now you have negotiating power to get a reduction on the price or a credit. So just make sure you order the survey. Obviously, you want it to come back good, but if it doesn't, at least you are dodging a bullet. You do not want to buy a property that has a significant encroachment or easement. You don't want those issues. You do not want those problems, okay? Because it's going to be harder for you to resell. You're going to be stuck with that headache. So just make sure you order a survey. If you are using a lender, you're 10 times out of 10 going to have to get a survey. But at least now you know what a survey is, and at least now you know what to look for. And if you aren't required to get a survey, if there's some lender who's saying you don't need a survey for whatever reason, still get that survey. Still get that survey, because that is going to, oh my goodness, you will dodge major bullets if there's an issue with the boundary lines on that property. So I hope you got value out of this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next video.